Okay. Uh, hello. Hello. Okay. Uh, let me take off my headphone really quick. Uh, hello. So I recently watched the movie Disclosure Day here, and it really brings up a lot of questions relating of science versus religion. Okay. And so let me pull up the questions here. And so it builds around Imago Day um and things like that. So we will be discussing many extremely deep theological questions. Deep theological questions. Uh so this is gonna get really uh philosophical, I think. So we will go into the depth of the incarnation, um, of the human dignity, idolatry, the nature of God, how big God is, and so Steven Spielberg, he wanted people to question religion, and so the question posed really, I just want to go into that and really kind of break that down. Okay, so the first question is, if Genesis implies humans are God's supreme creation, does that mean supreme in universe or merely supreme on earth? So that's just the first question, and now we have to go into what gives humans dignity, and so we can do that. And so here, this actually gets a bad rap. Rap like God's existence, proving um proving divinity. So many philosophers are not a big fan of going into the nitty gritty of human divinity, but morality, um, morality in terms of human dignity makes God's existence, makes the argument of human divinity, morality makes the argument of human dignity a really strong argument in order to really strong argument of human dignity. And so if we want to get really theological, it rests primarily of Imago Dei, and it's really um what the basis of most Abrahamic faith is, and it's that every human person is created in the image and likeness of God and is willed by God for himself. This theological principle affirms an intrinsic, equal, and inviolable worth that does not depend on the talents or social status of anything. So, the human body is a unity of a body and a spiritual immortal soul. The immortal soul um makes a person moral, rational, and a free agent of a capable relationship with God and of supernatural destiny. That spiritual connection grounds our special status. A rational so in conclusion, a rational soul is really what makes us made in the image of God. And from this dignity flow fundamentally moral claims and rights, the right to life, from conception to natural death, immunity from slavery, degraduation, and entitlement to respect, care, condition. It's just the basics of the church's social teachings is that all humans are created um in the likeness of God because all humans have a rational soul. Now now that begs the question, if there are other intelligent creatures, can we possibly conclude that they also have rational souls? Yes, they do have rational souls. If aliens exist and are smarter than us, they do have rational souls. Okay? So Genesis 2 says that God gives us dominion of all the animals on the earth, not the universe, but the earth. Oh my god. I put my hand in front of the camera and it just goes like that. That's really cool. Um, but the earth. So if human dignity comes from the soul, if us created in the image of God comes from our rational soul, all the being with a rational soul shares in that same dignity, shares in that same likeness and image of God. So specifically, aliens would actually prove God's love for other creatures. I think, yeah. And so next, the uniqueness of the incarnation, which if God became incarnate specifically as a human on Earth, how does that cosmic narrative scale? If there are older, wiser, more spiritually complex, non-human intelligences, would this require their own redemption or incarnation? That is another really deep question. And so, we have to go into the nature of the incarnation. Yeah, the nature of the incarnation. And so, and, and so that the eternal Son of God assumed a true human nature and became man without ceasing to be God. The union effected in Christ is hypostatic. One divine person subsists of two distinct natures, divine and human, each retaining oh my god, its own properties, yet united in one substance and person. So the human nature assumed by the word is complete, including a human body and a rational soul, not a mere appearance or partial humanity. Okay, this is not into the loss of either nature. To occur, the two natures remain wholly divided and wholly human while being personally united from the divine person of Jesus Christ. The divine person acts and experiences virtue of both manners and in nature consistent. So the historical dogmatic formulations of this truth were shaped by the church. Church's ecumenical council and patriotic theology, which reject errors that either divided one person of Christ or fused the nature. The incarnation made it possible to communicate with the divine life. So, this is why Christ is our one mediator. Christ became human so that humans may have a connection with God. If there are spiritual beings like aliens that have that kind of connection with God, it could be theoretically possible. It could be theoretically possible that the aliens need their their own incarnation. But my point, there are two ways you can look at it. Either certain species have certain spiritual troubles, and those spiritual troubles disconnect them from God. And since God is the personal and all loving God, God unites with uh, any species, human and extraterrestrial, in order to personally come down as the Logos, as someone who speaks their own language and save that certain species. And with the age of the universe, he can definitely do that. He can definitely do that because God reveals to us as we evolve over time. This is in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The second way we can look at it is that since both us and aliens share a rational soul, and the rational soul is the one that gives us dignity and the connection to God, then the rational soul, then if Christ affirms that rational soul, if Christ becomes human in order to affirm that rational soul and get that dignity, and if he died for that specific dignity because we have free will and the free will to sin, which means if aliens have a rational soul, they could also possibly sin. Um, then, uh, then Christ could die once. Christ could only die like once and save both humans and extraterrestrials. And so that begs a third question here. Um, a third question, a third response. If that would extraterrestrials sin? Like, if they are more spiritually connected from us in the movie, would extraterrestrials sin? Would they need a deeper connection with Christ, or have they already attained that? And so those questions being brought up a lot, I believe, after the movie fully released. I'm the first. I think I'm the first one to actually discuss these questions in detail. I'm waiting for Catholic Answers to do that. They probably would explain it better than me. They probably would explain it better than me. But still keep the main ideas. So So I don't know if it depends on the rational nature of aliens, like how spiritually close all those aliens to God. Oh my god. I have something in my eye. Wait a sec. I so we don't know about the nature of said aliens. The Catholic Church focuses on what God reveals and interpreting what God reveals. Deus Dixit. I think that's what it is. Deus Dixit. Yes, God continues to reveal, but through his Son, the incarnation of the eternal Word of God, or the Logos, God had inherently revealed everything. And in a way, we don't know how much aliens have figured out about Christ. We don't know if they have their own interpretation, their own incarnation. Of course, they could have like the same understanding of God as like one in three or something. We do not know. And of course we are still going to figure that out, but we do not know the specific nature of the aliens. And so we do not know if the aliens need an incarnation for themselves in order, or if Christ died specifically for the rational soul, and not just specifically for humans, but for the rational soul, and therefore dying also for extraterrestrials. Um, we do not know that, and so that's something the Catholic Church can respond to, but really, uh, if you want to know my full opinion, yes, they do need their own incarnation. They probably already have their own incarnation. Because through the incarnation, God revealed everything to them. Of course, Jesus doesn't have to die if he died for the rational soul, but the incarnation is God's way of revealing everything. So, yes, the aliens might need their own incarnation, but that also begs the case: is Satan only on Earth, or does are there other demons in other parts of the universe? And so let's look at the nature of skin as a whole. Oh my god. And it's a moral disorder where a rational creature freely acts against God's law, and the ultimate good with the creature is ordered as a privatation or distortion of the good proper as to being sin. It's not a positive thing, but a deficiency in the due order and will of reason that wounds the moral life. There are two principles in Catholic doctrine. Original sin denotes the hereditary deprivation of sanctifying grace. We don't know if aliens are born with sanctifying grace, if aliens are not born of sanctifying grace. That would be a depth we can get into, like interviewing aliens on the nature of aliens, or personal sin, any voluntary thought, word, deed, and omission contrary to God's law. It is further classified as venial or moral sin. Okay? So it all comes down to the nature of original sin, losing that sanctifying grace. And so if we have original sin, that defines what's good and bad. If we do not have original sin, then the goodness of God, God's law, is just to be. It's just what being is. Perfection, goodness, God's law. We do not know if aliens in their nature are inherently sinful or not inherently sinful. And so we can use philosophy to think about that. So, philosophy, let's think about two scenarios. Number one, if they have original sin, they will need their own incarnation in order to connect with God, and therefore, uh, therefore, they do not have like a unified religion and stuff, and therefore a lot of fights may break out. But I'm getting off topic. Therefore, they may have original. If they have original sin, they can personally sin, and they might need their own incarnation for God to have fully spoken, and for them to have hope in the knowledge of God. I'm sounding Gnostic. In the knowledge of God and His salvation and His saving grace. And since we all have a moral soul, and there is a possibility that Christ only died for the rational soul, Christ could possibly announce use the incarnation not to die for their sins again, but to uh, where is that? But to show them that God has died for their sins, to proclaim the gospel, to evangelize. If they do not have original sin, then God's law is just their nature. They have the sanctifying grace. God's law is just their nature. Yes, they have the free will to disobey, but God's law, goodness, is just to be. Just to be. Meaning God's law is their day-to-day life, and they do not commit personal sin. Because God's law is just to be. Okay, so that was a bit of philosophy. I'm not a philosopher. Now let's go to the next question. How does human psychology and theology adapt when humans are suddenly demoted from the protagonist of creation to a minor, potentially less advanced civilization? And so that connects with the first question. Human dignity comes from the rational soul. And if there's if there's extraterrestrial beings who also have a rational soul, possibly, then um, we're one among many of God's protagonists of creation. Like for example, we were placed on Earth to rule over the animals. It is not to rule over the universe. Okay? if we have ruled over the universe, we would basically be God, but we are not God. We are not the protagonist of creation. Uh, we're the protected of Earth, basically. And so, if we find alien in another planet, that does not subdue us, that does not disprove our dignity, that does not disprove Imago Dei, that just proves there are protectors of other planets with other creatures, and they are similar in dignity to us because they have similar or the same rational soul. And so they were also made in the image of God. And so, next question. Uh, the Supreme Being Dilemma. When Jane asks how humans can pivot from worshipping an abstract Supreme Being to interacting with literal, tangible Supreme Being, what happens to human religious behavior? The advanced alien inevitably become proxy deities. And so, if there was a physical, powerful being, would that replace God? Now, this is something I think Saint Ignatius of Antioch answered that he does not worship matter, he worships the creator of matter. So, this is also the suffering argument, but a finite, physical, powerful being could not replace God. God is a simple, infinite, self existent being whose essence and existence are identical. God is the creator and the first cause of all that exists. He is not a contingent part of the created order. A created physical being is by definition contingent, composite, and limited, therefore cannot possess the divine perfection of self-existence, infinity, or absolute simplicity. A created nature opposes by received being and power, whereas God alone is the uncaused cause, whose experience does not depend on anything else. Any hypothesis is just uh, powerful physical energy, presuppose a nature subject to composition, change, and dependence, and so cannot be identical with the one true God professed by the Church. Philosophical objections make God a being among others. That objection makes God a being among others. But God is not a being among others. He is the one God. He is the one God that is infinite. That is infinite. And that, if human dignity was historically been, been anchored in a unique relationship with God, what happened to that dignity if the human race views us the way humans view less intelligent animals? That worth remain intrinsic, or does it become relative? So, um, no, it does not replace human dignity, and no, human dignity is not relative. We gain our unique relationship with God due to our rational soul God given us. And so over time, there is evolution and stuff like that. And so over time, we have evolved in order to, I don't have a script. I don't have a script for this. I should have made one. I should have made one. Yeah, normally I sound more confident with a script. This is this is just all from my head and the research up and the research I just do on the fly. So it is not relative to outside beings. Okay? Every being with a rational soul has dignity. So that means both aliens and humans have a certain type of dignity, philosophically, I think. Um, and so the rational soul is not relative. We also have achieved great things by our rational thought. We have successfully subdued the earth, as Genesis 2 puts it. Um, so due to our evolution, anyone we can conclude that it is based on our rational soul. Aliens who are who we can assume are also religious and spiritual in some sense are uh also have a rational soul. Yes, they also have a rational soul. And that's the one thing we share. What we do not share is the evolution of that rational soul. Now, Catholics affirm evolution. We will get into that later. Now, for the next question, if human dignity, as noted by some theological critics of film, are seeking awe, marvel, and salvation from advanced extraterrestrials constitute as a false enchantment that replaces true spiritual transcendence with mere material theological supremacy. Okay, so first we have to define false enchantment according to the Catholic faith here. Here. So here it says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, you shall not covet." It's a deceptive attraction or apparent wonder that leads the soul away from divine truth and towards error, like influence, and it's a moral danger. False enchantment can denote practices that purpose to manipulate hidden forces and so produce seemingly marvelous effects by means other than God. Gratuitous power or an persuasion that such power as being true or possess salvific value. So, going on our other assumptions that aliens share their dignity with us because they share a rational soul with us, they are using the gift of the rational soul. Okay? So they are not attaining salvation through their technological advancement. And so worshiping technological advancement possibly could possibly could uh possibly could be a sense of false enchantment, but really using a rational soul in order to evolve, in order to go to other planets or something. That is not false enchantment, that is evolution. It is you when that that wonder leads someone away from religion. And and so that's when it's false enchantment. In the movie, I am not gonna spoil it. I'm not gonna spoil anything. So in the movie, it is seen that aliens. It is not defined if aliens are spiritual. It is not defined if aliens are not spiritual. It just defines that aliens know more than us in order to pose the philosophical question. It does not show if the salvific if they use it as a deception because it is not against the Catholic religion. And next question. Does disclosure force us to change our understanding of God from a human centric protector to a vast cosmic architect whose intention spans billions of light years and multiple intelligent species? Um, God is infinite. I don't believe in any way would God protect only humans. If someone else if something else had a rational soul, they would be within the same dignity as in God's eyes. Okay? It's deeply philosophical. I am not a philosopher. But it's not human centric, it's rational soul centric. We are special and we have dignity because God gave us a rational soul. If we can assume aliens are smart, they have free will and they can do whatever through the evolution and usage of technology. And that means that in a way God would protect them too. God would uh determine them equal to humans. Equal to humans. That goes back to the first question. Next, is traditional divine revelation complete if an alien race possesses a fundamentally superior understanding of physics, consciousness, the origins of the universe? Would humans rely on their data to answer the ultimate metaphysical question? Uh, so divine revelation is complete in Jesus, in the Logos. Okay, God has spoken everything He wanted to speak. Okay, our limited knowledge of God does not disprove that God has fully spoken. Okay, like for example, my limited knowledge of space does not disprove the vastness of space there already is. Okay? So, what God has spoken is not equivalent to what we found out about God. Okay? God has spoken many things, possibly things we have not discovered yet. That does not disprove the completeness of revelation in the church. And last question, should these non-human intelligences be viewed as fellow biological creatures of God, or do they represent a strong delusion or demonic deception meant to pull humanity away from the faith? So, that is in terms of the nature of the alien. If we can conclude that uh, an alien has a rational soul, a rational mind, and they have knowledge of the one true God, we cannot define it as in a deception. If they are really atheistic, really prideful, if they have fallen into sin, we could say that is a deception. But we don't know the nature of aliens, because, and I am not gonna get all conspiracy theorists here. I'm just getting into like a bit of the nitty gritty. Okay, I'm just answering the best I can. If Catholic answers can just do a deep dive on that, um, yeah, yeah, you can do that. So the main thing here is science versus religion, and so it's like creation versus evolution and the Big Bang. And we can also discuss what is the rational soul. So these three things, when looking at the movie, would be pretty helpful. First, go ahead and talk about evolution, and I recommend uh, the Catholicism in focus on evolution, and so many people mistakenly believe that the theory of evolution undermines the existence of God or the inerrancy of Scripture, but it's important that we understand what the theory is, what it maintains, and what the church teaches. Evolution proposes an explanation of how life in general, and mankind in particular, arose and holds that there is a long arose. It holds that there was a long period in which natural processes gave life to life into different life forms on Earth. Okay, okay, yeah. Bye. Okay. Uh, with natural processes gave life to life into the different life forms on Earth. God is free to create either quickly or slowly, and either directly or through processes that he set up. He can either do a mixture of these things, such as creating the universe in an instant, and then having it experience a long, slow process of development, giving rise to stars and planets, and eventually life forms, including human beings. And so another point is that evolution proves God nature. God does not stop creating, and so God can freely create more and more through the process of evolution. And since everyone is unique in a way, God creating us through the process of evolution and these different genetics and natural selection over time, it does not replace God, but shows but it shows that God is infinitely creating, infinitely making us better, and that infinite creation is what makes God God. And so next the Big Bang, which arrived in the earlier 20th century, the Belgian priest and physicist this Georges Lemaitre concluded that Einstein's new theory of gravity would cause a static eternal universe to collapse into nothingness. Since Einstein's theory was sound, this only meant one thing: the universe was growing, it had a beginning, it's the finite in the finite path. Father Lemon Einstein would discuss the cosmic consequences of the theory while walking around the campus of Caltech. And although Einstein was skeptical at first, in 1933 he proclaimed that Lemaitre's theory of expanding universes was one of the most beautiful theories he had ever heard. And so the Big Bang um, had proof, and it was mocked for trying to put religion into science. And so Father Lemaitre, his theory was revolutionary. Hoyle argued with the steady state theory of the universe and claimed that there was no empirical evidence for Father Lemontre's model. Einstein was also skeptical that no cosmic rays or after effects from the Big Bang has ever been discovered. However, using radio telescopes, we have gotten more and more proof. And so the Big Bang does not disprove God, but I believe the Big Bang proves God because it goes from sudden to a slow, continuous process of creation. So that's what I like about creation, the creation of God. Up, wait, the creation of God? What? No, God was not created. Anyway, so in science, I can argue that science proposes that God creates slowly and over time, which is act which actually goes hand in hand with the theological position of God, that God is infinite and unchanging. He can't just create once and stop creating. No, he is always creating. He is always creating unique things. And so the constant creation of a being over time, um, the constant creation of a being over time, uh, is is something unique. It causes evolution. It causes generational learning. It because just like God's revelation being flowing over time, um, I believe it's safe to assume that God's creation is flowing over time. God can create however He wants. So, and also the human dignity comes from the human soul, and the human soul is how we are rational and we can think about God. We can make free decisions whether to sin or not sin. And so other creatures can have that rational thought. They can be declared in God's eyes as equal to humans. And I think that covers everything. Yes, that covers everything. I will put this into a script and make a more confident response. I think like around next week, so that it may just become like an article and stuff. We will be diving deeper once it releases, like fully out of theaters, and we will discuss this more. So this is quite a short episode of All Day with Kato, and bye bye. It was just a small discussion.